AITA for refusing to pay for my brother's fiance's wedding dress that I stained. My brother's fiancée, Emma, 25, and my brother, Jonathan, 27, were getting married. My brother's fiancée has 2 kids, 6 and 7, and they're both boys. Emma bought a wedding dress that was very expensive and wanted to brag it to the whole family. So she decides to display it in the middle of the kitchen where kids are horseplaying. Honestly, just by the sound of that, it already is a disaster. Well, everyone was socializing and drinking. I was holding a glass of wine while talking to a childhood friend when suddenly one of her kids runs into me, causing the wine to fling and it got all over the wedding dress. Her kid got up and started to cry. Emma was furious and she cried. Everyone looked at me like I was at fault. My brother told me to leave. That night I was contemplating what had happened when I get a call from my brother. He sounded upset and was talking aggressively, demanding for me to pay for the damages I had caused. I told him why he's not blaming the kid. His excuse was he's just a kid. Don't bring him into this. You did the damage and should take responsibility for it. I was shook and told him that he ran into me and asked him why I was getting all the blame. He then ended the call with, "I don't care, just pay for the damage." Long story short, I called him back and explained to him that I will not be paying for the dress. He was angry and started shouting on the phone, saying I'm the biggest asshole he had ever met for not taking responsibility for my actions. I then asked him what actions I caused, but he kept repeating himself, saying just to pay for the dress and we can forget about everything. I told him I will not be paying thousands of dollars because a kid was running around and ran into me, causing the wine to fling and stain the dress. Later that night his wife called me and was angry, calling me names like coward, bastard, bitch, asshole, etc. I was upset but didn't let my emotions take over me. I stopped her midway talking and asked where the idea of displaying an expensive white dress in the middle of the kitchen came from. She didn't answer the question and started to call me names again. I hung up and blocked her. After that everyone in my family started contacting me. Mom, sister, brother, etc. They were sending my text messages calling me a bad person. To end the conflict, I paid them $2,500. I regret doing it, but it's whatever now. The only thing that got me upset was that I don't understand why her child didn't get any part of the blame. AITA. TLDR, I refused to pay for my brother's fiance's wedding dress after her son ran into me, causing the dress to be stained. AITA for saying I'm not allowing my daughter to call me by my first name, just because my stepdaughter does. My wife has a 13-year-old daughter from her first marriage. She obviously calls me by my first name, as she has a very present and active dad. My wife and I also have a 4-year-old daughter and 10-month-old son. Originally, my daughter was calling me daddy. Recently, she's been calling me by my first name. I let it go for a bit, but after a few months, it wasn't ending. I know it's innocent and she's only doing it because her sister is. I don't make a big deal of it. For example, if she says, "Can I please have juice, Justin?" I'll respond, "Daddy will get you some juice." I've gently told her before I am dad/daddy. Her sister calls me by my first name because she already has a dad. I'm not offended by this at all. I get it's normal. I just want to correct it now versus it become a habit and it never ends. Especially as we have a younger child who will soon be learning to talk. My wife thinks I'm overreacting and should just let her call me whatever she wishes. She claims if our kids called her by her first name she wouldn't care, but they never have, so I think it's easy to say. I'm not on a power trip, I just think it's okay to want to be called dad. As long as I'm gently correcting her and not making a big deal, it shouldn't matter. The other night, my daughter asked for something using my first name. I said Dad will get it and she actually corrected herself saying, "Oh, yes please Daddy." My wife rolled her eyes and said I had broken her spirit. Was I wrong to gently correct her on this? AITA for considering and giving more to my son than to my daughter in my will? I, as a 64-year-old man, want to start off by stating that I currently have stage 4 lung cancer, so I may not have even a year left to live now. To start off, my daughter who is 30 and son who is 26 both ended up with very different paths in life. Like the rest of women in our family, my daughter wanted to go to medical school and study to become a dermatologist, since she wanted to have a successful job no matter what, and that she loves studying about skin conditions as well. That meant that she was willing to do whatever it takes, for getting scholarships and to working multiple jobs, although I tried to help her pay her tuition as much as I can, to make that happen. So now, she currently is working her dream job, and making a very good living, about $250,000 a year, and very debt-free now. Which is something that I am very proud of her for. while my son decided to give up on going to further schooling just so he can help aid his sick mother when her health heavily declined from leukemia around when our son was 14 and our daughter was 18. So, in order to focus more on taking care of his now late mother, and then me after I got lung cancer, my son has completely focused on working only minimum wage jobs just so that he can have more time to care for us. And even if I knew that he probably wanted to go to college and I told him to not worry about us, my son was still so kind enough to decide to focus more on us instead so that his sister wouldn't be burdened with doing so, and simply because he loved us. Because I feel so grateful and responsible for him sacrificing so much for us, I decided to let both my children know that when I die my son is to keep the house, all the possessions that we have in the house including our car, and 80% of whatever money that I have left, in hopes that he could eventually use it to go to college if he wanted to. And that my daughter can have the other 20% of the money, because I wanted to leave something, but didn't think that she needed the money that much, since she has a well-paying job, for her to be left behind with many of her mother's possessions and whatever my son didn't want to inherit from me. Of course, I did expect my daughter to be somewhat upset about this, with her potentially believing that I am favoring my son more than her, despite me trying to explaining that I am simply trying to pay back my son for all the help he gave to me and that I really don't favor him more than her. However, what I didn't expect is the rest of my family, especially the women, to call me as well and berating me for acting misogynistic and that I was punishing my daughter for her successes when I only simply wanted to give back to my son for helping me and my late wife. AITA, and should I reconsider splitting the accesses of my will 50-50 before it's too late? AITA, for asking the woman I've been seeing to politely ask for things from me instead of demanding it from me. I, 21M, have been seeing this woman, 23F, for more than half a year now. I'm Chinese and she's Russian, but we've been living in Australia for a while now. Both of us live in the same uni dorm. She has this thing where when she requests for something from me she does not just ask for it. For example, instead of asking hey can I please have this, she goes give me this / that in a very demanding tone, and it makes me uncomfortable. In the past I've pointed it out to her that it's coming across as rude and asked her to ask politely. She listened. Today we were hanging in my room. I was studying when she came up to me and said give me your laptop, I need to pay my rent, in a short and direct manner without smiling. It did not sound friendly at all. I told her that sounded so demanding and it's coming across as rude, and asked her if she could use phrases like could you please? She got mad at me and said I'm picking on her English. I told her I'm not, but just asking her to ask in another way since she is coming across as rude. She then said it's only a problem that existed in the English language and it shouldn't matter. She got really mad. In the end she left my room and went back to hers. From my point of view, I was just simply communicating with her about what's making me uncomfortable and made a simple request for her to ask questions instead of demanding things from me. Even when I ask her for things, I go with hey, may I please? I was a bit surprised when she got mad at me. As for the problem that only existed in English part, my stand is that different languages have different ways of expressing emotions and tones, and since we're speaking in English, we should follow the ways the English language express politeness and friendliness and avoid sounding rude. She's been pushing me to make her my GF, but I've been hesitant, and her demanding things from me is one of the reasons why. I talked to her multiple times about her way of requesting things but she still didn't listen. AITA, for asking the woman I've been seeing to politely ask for things from me instead of demanding it from me. TLDR, woman I have been seeing for over half a year has been demanding things from me instead of asking. Today she did it again. I asked her to ask in a more polite way and she got mad at me. AITA, for asking the woman I've been seeing to politely ask for things from me instead of demanding it from me. AITA, for not sigging up my stepdaughter in a class. My wife and I have 2 kids, 15F Annie that is hers and 14F Zoe that is me. We got married 4 months ago. Zoe is very active. She goes to painting class, violin class, basketball class and ballet class. She has to do something at all times and hates not having anything to do. Unlike most teenagers, she doesn't spend much time on her phone or electronics, and these are her only hobbies. Now that we are married, my wife asked me to sign Annie up for a class as I make more than her and she can afford it. The problem is I can't afford it, so in order to do that Zoe needs to quit one of her classes, which is not an option. I told my wife that Annie never did anything, so why does it suddenly have to change? Like she was completely fine with playing with her phone all the time for 15 years, but now that it will be from my money she suddenly needs to go to a class? And it's fine if she does, but then my wife should be the one paying. My wife thinks I'm a huge asshole.